And welcome back to part 2 of Life Abroad. We are kicking off the new season of Making Connections with a very special interview with the president of the Korea Foundation, Dr. Geun. He is an international relations expert who served as policy advisor for the Foreign Ministry. He's a professor of international relations at Seoul National University, Graduate School of International Studies, and also served as the vice president and dean of the same school, the SNU Office of International Affairs. And welcome to Life Abroad, Dr. Lee.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It is our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. We have many questions for you, a fascinating discussion, especially I think at this time when we hear so much about Korea's culture and popular culture really gaining a lot of attention and popularity around the world. So we're also going to discuss how Korea Foundation is working to propel that and promote that as well. So the Korea Foundation, for our listeners who may not know, it's the public diplomacy arm of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so public diplomacy, it's a term that has been kind of bandied about, and we may have heard it one time or another. But for those of us who are not 100% sure on exactly what public diplomacy means, let's start off by defining what it is.
Well, public diplomacy has so many different definitions.
Oh, really?
In accordance with different scholars.
Okay.
But my definition of public diplomacy is diplomacy toward the general public or public opinion of other countries. Mm-hmm. So we specifically target the opinions of expert groups or artists or academia or Congress, policymakers, depending upon the different issues. So it is about creating public opinion, which is favorable to Korea, Korea's policies, or Korea's standing in the world.
I've also heard or seen one sort of definition saying public diplomacy, I'm struggling with that word today. Public diplomacy promotes soft power, and that kind of seems to be kind of a differentiation between sort of the regular diplomacy, I guess, that we would think, because soft power is a little bit different, right? I mean, when we talk about soft power, it's about attracting, it's persuading through attraction and appealing, not so much might and military might or economic power. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, again, soft power is not a very simple definition, but my definition of soft power or my explanation of soft power is influencing others without flexing military muscle.
Yeah.
So you can influence others by arts, ideas, theories, norms, values, or sports events, those kind of soft resources. Right. So you use attractiveness of Korea to influence other people's minds, thinking, mindsets.
So how do you do that? What are some of the activities that you focus on at the Korea Foundation?
Korea Foundation is an organization that builds networks all around the world. In order to influence others, you need networks, human networks and organizational networks. So we build networks in the Korean studies abroad, particularly the universities all around the world, starting from Ivy League universities in the USA and other top-rated universities like Oxford, Cambridge, King's College, or Singapore National University. So we build networks over there, and we promote Korean studies so that other people can understand, what Korea represents, the history of Korea or culture of Korea. So we build networks in those areas. And secondly, we also build networks among galleries, museums, and we support the curators who are experts on the Korean culture and Korean arts. And we also build networks with artists, think tanks, scholars, university students. And by building networks, we can influence others by transmitting our ideas, policy, ideas or values, theories, those kind of things. Also, we introduce Korean arts, Korean artists, celebrities, and they are very, very good assets for Korea's public diplomacy.
sounds like a lot of work. You are doing a lot of things.
Not me, the staffs. The staffs.
It sounds like, the central word or the key word that you mention a lot is about building networks, building networks between countries, building networks between institutions like schools, but also between people.
Right.
And so we're not only promoting Korea, but we're also trying to promote their countries and other countries and their people to Koreans as well. So it's that promotional exchange, I guess, that's also very important.
Absolutely. The two-way cultural exchanges is very, very important. Otherwise, it's going to be, a kind of cultural imperialism toward those countries.
Because I remember when I was involved in the Pyeongchang bid as well, that was actually one of the criticism that was levied at, I think, previous bids or kind of sort of Korean endeavors to win something. They said that sometimes you're too intent on relaying your message, but you don't do enough listening and trying to learn and exchange as well. You're just too focused on giving out your message. You need to give a back and forth. That's what builds trusting relationships.
Right. And speaking of two-way culture exchanges, the Korea Foundation also has the so-called ASEAN Culture House in Busan areas. And there we introduce the cultures of Southeast Asian countries voluntarily for them. And also at the Seoul office, we have Korea Foundation Global Center. And there we also introduce the cultures and history of many different countries which have embassies in Seoul.
Right. Okay, so very important, and it seems like you're doing a lot of things, again, not only to promote Korea, but also to promote other countries and their cultures inside Korea as well. Now, you took office as president of Korea Foundation in 2019, and I understand that was a year after the Korea Foundation relocated its main headquarters. You mentioned you have office in Seoul and Busan, but the main headquarters was relocated to Jeju in 2018. First of all, I'm very envious, but was there a particular reason why the Korea Foundation relocated to Jeju?
I'm not very well informed about the relocation.
Because you joined afterwards,
policies,
right?
Right. But it is a part of the national, relocation program toward provincial areas of the governmental and official, organizations.
Okay. Do you see any benefit of having relocated to Jeju, though? Like when it comes to the work that you do?
Warm weather, beautiful scenery, ocean, seas, those kind of things.
I guess if it wasn't for the pandemic, you might have more people visiting the Korea Foundation headquarters in Jeju as well?
Well, Korea Foundation headquarters is not very popular among tourists.
I see.
But there have been a lot of tourists toward Jeju Island these days. Yes.
Yeah. I understand that this year actually marks the 30th anniversary of the Korea Foundation. And I was actually quite surprised at how long it's been around, because this concept of public diplomacy and soft power, as far as I knew anyways, it hasn't been around for all that long, because we have to build up economic might, military might, and this is how we influence other countries. But this notion of public diplomacy, for us to have introduced this 30 years ago, that is pretty forward thinking. What do you think has been the major achievement of the Korea Foundation over the past 30 years? I know it's a big question, but...
Yeah, I already introduced what we were doing in terms of network building.
Right.
But a lot of people would be surprised to find out that we have about 140 Korean studies professorships all over the world in the prestigious universities. And also we had about 12,000 distinguished guests and distinguished people invited to Korea. That include a lot of politicians, very famous people who can influence the public opinion making. And also we have around 7,500 scholars who have been benefited by our fellowship programs. And we have about 28 galleries and museums all over the world that introduce Korean arts. And at the same time, we have organized about 263 forums and seminars. So those are some of the statistics that people might be interested to hear about the activities of Korea Foundation.
Very impressive. I like you say, over 30 years, that's very impressive that you have been able to achieve those numbers, because I guess with public diplomacy or soft power, sometimes it's kind of difficult to quantify, right? To show the actual results. But through these very specific programs, you have been able to do a lot of that networking and that sort of building of goodwill in overseas countries. But over the past 30 years as well, don't you think that Korea's public image or national brand image, that it has changed so dramatically as well? I mean, obviously, the government and these public organizations have been doing a lot, but like BTS, helping to promote the Korean language, that must be quite amazing as well. How do you get like a group like BTS to come on board, and how do you collaborate with them to make this Korean language curriculum?
Well, the BTS, the group itself, it's very difficult to contact them because they are so busy.
If you can give us some tips, we would like to have them on the show.
But we were able to find some connection with the company. And the company happens to publish a textbook on Korean language together with the BTS's song lyrics. So in the Korean Studies Program Bureau of the Korea Foundation, from last year, we introduced this textbook to the Korean Studies program abroad. So it was quite fortunate for us.
Has it been popular? What's the response been?
The textbooks are very, very well made, and it's very popular.
I can imagine.
Very popular.
Right.
Yeah.
But with the 30th anniversary, I imagine you were also planning many special events to celebrate the 30th anniversary. We were hoping that last year maybe that, you know, the pandemic would be over by 2021. We can kind of return to our lives as normal. It doesn't seem that way. 2021 seems like we're still going to have to live with our masks on and whatnot. So has that caused, I mean, obviously it's caused a change in your plans to maybe celebrate 30 years, but has it also changed kind of your approach and policies going forward, like post-pandemic? Has it changed anything?
Oh, it has changed quite a lot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of accelerated the transformation we were planning from the past. That is digital transformation. So a lot of things have been digitized, and we had seminars through Zoom or webinars, through internet, and we also created a lot of digital contents, arts, cultural affairs. And at the same time, a lot of things have been digitized. And by digitizing our activities, we were able to reach wider audience. So there is a very good, there is a silver lining, if you will.
Right.
And at the same time, Korea has been quite successful in overcoming COVID-19 crisis. So we were able to introduce Korea as a very advanced country in terms of public sector competitiveness, IT sector, innovations, creativity. Therefore, these kinds of experiences have helped us to upgrade our image and our standing in the world.
But what do you think is missing? I mean, is there an area or maybe a sector that you think may have not been promoted as much and you think can be very competitive? Because, I mean, we've seen especially with culture, I mean, Minari, once again, just 1 year after Parasite, all this buzz around Minari and so loved by audiences around the world. We've got Blackpink on top of BTS. So we seem to be doing very well in the popular sort of culture, but is there an area where you think we need to do more work and maybe promoting this to overseas or more promoting exchanges as well?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, there are two areas.
Okay.
Korea has been praised as a country that democratized very fast, that modernized very fast, that owns groups like BTS or JYP groups or SM entertainment groups. But at the same time, I want to upgrade Korea's position in the world as an advanced, creative, innovative country. And in order to do that, we need to build networks in the science and technology areas, and we also need to introduce our talents in those areas. And secondly, you cannot be recognized as one of the leading countries unless your high culture is introduced. There are two different kinds of cultures. One is high culture, the other one is popular culture.
Right. We don't call it low culture, right? It's popular culture.
I have to be politically correct.
Very good. Definitely diplomat there.
So high culture refers to classical arts, classical novels, paintings, architecture, fashion, or Korean
traditional
cuisine.
art, maybe traditional
sometimes
culture,
traditional, sometimes culture that is more sophisticated. if I can't be politically incorrect, in the past, high culture belongs to the high society people, aristocrats. But unless you have both popular culture and high culture introduced together abroad, it is very difficult to be recognized as a very, well, deep-rooted country in the world, advanced country.
But when you say high culture, does that mean Korea's traditional high culture, or would it be classical music or the Western sort of art or the Western high culture that is now taken root in Korea? Would it be both, I guess?
I think these days, a lot of things are converged together.
Okay.
So the traditional culture, popular culture can evolve into a different kind of high culture,
So what do we need to do then to sort of address those two areas? And I also wanted to ask you, because I heard kind of along the lines what I've talked about before, that Koreans were very hardworking, very, very smart. We work fast, we work hard. But when it comes to promoting what we do and making it appealing to maybe an international audience, sometimes we lack that. We're not good. We are kind of raised to be very modest. We don't know how to promote ourselves. We don't know how to market ourselves. Do you think that is also kind of a sticking point or something that's blocking us from promoting in those two areas that you mentioned?
As you said, the history of public diplomacy in Korea is not very long. Therefore, there are a lot of things that we need to learn from other countries. For example, the public diplomacy is very well exercised by the countries that had empires before.
Like France, Britain,
USA, Japan, UK.
Yeah.
So we are not very good at that at the moment. But thanks to the popular culture, K-pop, K-cinema, we have a kind of battleground upon which we can, accumulate our high culture.
Right.
So we need to take advantage of those, popularity of Korean popular culture.
So what, maybe if our listeners or maybe even the younger generation, because they will be responsible for public diplomacy, whether they're directly in the field or not, I think we can all become public diplomats, can we not? We can all sort of promote the soft power of Korea. So what would be your advice to them? And is there a way that they can get involved in maybe some projects with the Korea Foundation? What's a way for young people to get involved, or maybe our listeners to get involved?
Well, I was born, my generation was born during the day of Korea as a developing country. But the young people these days, they were born when Korea is and was an advanced country. So the young people are natural global people. They are globalized through culture by, traveling abroad. So given opportunities, I think they will naturally, introduce and transmit Korean attractiveness. Of course, we can support them. We have many programs for them. So on our homepage, website, there are a lot of information for them to apply to certain projects.
Because I think you can also get some great ideas from these young people too, who all, like you say, they are very global and they do tend to be very creative and very trendy as well. So it could be a way to, maybe exchange or get some ideas from these, our regular listeners or regular people as well. Last question. Any events planned for this year? Maybe, I know that you said you had to move many things online, but do you have any special events planned for this year?
Yeah, since we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the foundation, we have prepared a year-long events starting from ASEAN Cinema Week, about a week after.
That's ongoing, actually, isn't it?
I think so, yes. The road show has been already done. We are going to introduce 30 movies, cinemas from relatively less known countries. Because they are 30 because we are celebrating 30th anniversary.
Of course, got it.
And also we are going to publish a history of Korea Foundation and Korea's public diplomacy by the summer of this year. And we are also preparing, year-long, perhaps every month, different events. So you can expect a lot of good things from us.
Right. I checked out your Gram account as well. So I think you're updating all your social media accounts with all these special events as well. The ASEAN Cinema Week, can you watch them online or do you go to an offline sort of a theater to watch it?
Basically online.
Okay.
There are offline events as well,
Very
but
good.
it is very difficult to access them.
All right, very good. Well, Dr. Geun, I want to thank you once again for taking the time to join us for this special interview. Dr. Geun of Korea Foundation, once again, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.